Alright, so I know it's been a bit of work so far, but I did say that this would be our most complex component so far, and it's probably arguably one of the most complex components of the site. So we really have been learning a lot here about setting up our environment variables and creating some dynamic functionality here for the carousel, and it's going to be a really cool effect, so it'll be worth it. If we look over at the browser, we see that we've got these pretty big images here. It definitely doesn't look exactly how I would like, so let's keep working on it. One thing here, you see when we hover over the image, we're getting that background hover from the icon button. So we already disabled the ripple here, but let's go ahead and get rid of that by going ahead and adding the classes prop here, specify the root class of the icon button, and let's just give it the classes.icon button class. And now we can scroll up, create our icon button class, and give it the on hover styles. So and:hover. So when we're hovering over the icon button, let's set that background color to transparent. And if we save that and flip back on over, now we're not getting that hover. Okay, but we need our images to be definitely a lot smaller, and we want them to be on the white background, like the design. So we'll flip on over. Let's go ahead and give our image tag here for each of the slides the class name of classes.carousel image. Now we can come up and create our carousel image class. And let's go ahead and give this a height of 30 rem, a width of 25 rem, and then a background color of white, a border radius of 20, so we get curved corners. And then I want these to look like they're a little bit elevated, so we can do that with a box shadow. So that'll just draw a shadow underneath the image. And we'll go ahead and we actually have a bunch of shadows pre-built into Material UI that we can access from the theme.shadows. And then this is an array, so we can specify an index representing from lowest to highest the type of shadow that we want. So with 1 being the smallest shadow, and I think it goes up to like 25 for the highest, let's give it a shadow of 5. Let's go ahead and save that and flip back to the browser and check that out. We've now got a pretty good looking image just like from the design file. Now, there's clearly a couple problems still here. One of those problems is that the images are a little bit over too far to the left, and that's actually because of the way that this carousel is created and the way that the other images are pulled behind it. It moves everything over. So we need to add an extra style to push it back into place where we'd want it. So let's go ahead and let's find down inside of our function the item wrapping our carousel, and let's give this a classes of the root for the grid classes.carousel container. And this way it'll apply to the entire carousel component. Okay, we'll come up and let's create our carousel container. And we'll go ahead and give this a margin left of 20 rem to push that back over into the middle. So go ahead and save that. And now we see that we've got that looking much more like where we would want it. Now, we've also got a problem here where our text for the name is a little bit too long because we have that extra dash hoodie added in there. So I want to go ahead and pull that off. So what we can do is we can go ahead and scroll down to where we're rendering the node.name, and let's go ahead and split that name, and let's split it at the space character. Okay, so now every time there's a space, it's going to break those pieces into different parts of an array. So it'll have an array with this being the first element, and then this being the second element, and then this being the third element. So since that'll return an array, we should be able to specify the 0th index of that array and save that to just get the text itself. Now, if we want to go ahead and get this text centered up with the image here, we need to go in on the grid item container direction of column. Remember, this is holding the grid item for the icon button and the image, which is appearing at top, and then the grid item, which is holding the name. So if we want these to be centered, and remember, we want this to be pushed over to the right, so vertically to center it up. So for a direction of column, well, actually, sorry, I didn't mean to say vertically. We want it centered over horizontally. We need to push it over horizontally to get it centered over. So to center horizontally in a direction of column, that's going to be the cross axis. So we can specify the align items prop of center and save that and see the text now centered up. So now we've still got another problem where the other slides are actually hidden back behind this first slide. So that's because of the background image that we applied to this. We definitely don't want that to happen. So what we can do is we will use that CLSX library that we had imported to conditionally add a class name so that if the slide is not our selected slide, we'll go ahead and add some margin to push those slides out from behind. All right, so what we can do is come here where we're setting the icon button class, and we'll go ahead and wrap that with parentheses and call CLSX. All right, and we'll pass this as the first argument. So we want this to be our base class that is applied regardless. But then let's pass in an object, and here, whatever properties are true, the property name is going to be applied as one of the classes. Okay, so it's a little confusing, but the syntax is probably easier to understand than talking about it. So inside of this, we can use the bracket notation to insert a variable as a property name. So we'll set the classes dot space class that we'll create in a second to actually space this out. And then for the value of this property, we set the condition that we want to check. So in this case, we'll check that the selected slide is not equal to the current index that we're mapping over. So now the classes dot space class will only be applied if it is not the selected slide. And that'll be applied along with the icon button class, regardless. All right, so now we can come up and create our space class, and let's set a margin, and we'll use the shorthand of 0 for the top and bottom, and then 15 rem for the left and right sides. So let's go ahead and save that and flip on over and check that out. Now we've actually got our images appearing from underneath. Now it does look like they actually need to be pushed up maybe just a little bit. So for the margin bottom, let's actually go ahead and add a margin bottom property of, let's try 5 rem and save that. And push those up a little bit. Let's do a little more. Let's try 10 rem. We'll save that. And I think that looks perfect. This is really starting to come together now. We've got this basically looking exactly how we want it to. So before we set up the functionality, let's go ahead and set up the description over here. And that should be pretty easy. So we'll scroll down, and instead of just rendering out our description here, let's go ahead and cut that, and we'll instead add it inside of a typography variant of H2, or from the theme. And let's go ahead and we can add a property onto this that will make sure that the button for the Explore button underneath it appears underneath it. We can add the paragraph prop, and that will just mark this as a paragraph and automatically add a line return after it and force whatever we put underneath it to appear underneath it. Okay, so if we didn't include the paragraph and then we added a button underneath this typography, a button here, then they would sit left to right next to each other. But if we add the paragraph prop, that's going to force this button to appear underneath the typography. All right, so inside that typography H2, let's go ahead and render out our description. And now inside of the button, the reason that we'll use a button is because it is actually built for us to pass in some text and optionally an icon, and it'll handle the alignment for the text and the icon inside of there to look appropriate for a button. So it just simplifies things a little bit. So we'll add a typography variant, this time of H4, and this will just have the text Explore inside. And then next to the typography, we want the actual image for the Explore icon. So that will be an image with a source of the Explore icon that we've imported and an alt of go to product page. We'll go ahead and close that off. Let's go ahead and save that and flip on over and check that out. We've now got a pretty nice looking description over here. So now a few things to clean up. I don't want the Explore text to be all capitalized, and I also want a little bit of space in between it and the icon. And then I also want all of this to actually be right aligned. All right, so we can take care of that. If we go ahead and let's give our typography wrapping Explore, classes root, and then classes dot explore. Now we can come up and let's create our Explore class, and we can disable the text being capitalized with text transform of none. Let's go ahead and save that and see that now our text is no longer being auto capitalized. We can also go ahead and give that a margin right of, let's do 2 rem, save that, and now we have a little space between the icon. So to get all of this right aligned, we can actually use a little trick that I've picked up, and we can do this on the grid item wrapping our description and the button, because we want both the description to be right aligned and then the button to be right aligned as well. So you can actually align the content within a grid item. Remember, for the justify and the align items props, that only works on grid containers. Okay, but for a grid item, you have a smaller amount of control, but there is a little trick that we can use. If we use the classes and then set the class of root, classes dot description container, and now let's come up, create our description container class, and we can set a text align to move this over to the right. All right, so for your grid items, you can move them left and right using the text align property. You can align the content inside of the grid item using the text align property. So it's a little trick that I've picked up. We can save that, flip back on over, and we now see that moved to the right. So we're almost finished up with this. All we need to do now is actually make it so that when we click on these slides, it is going to actually take us to the other slides. So we've already got it set up where we're holding the selected slide in our state, and we have our set selected slide prop, or function rather, not prop. It's a function that we can use to set our state. So on the icon button that we're rendering for each of our slides, let's add the onClick property, and we can go ahead and call, using the arrow function, set selected slide, and we'll set this to the slide that we are iterating over, so the index of the current slide. All right, so let's go ahead, save that, flip back on over, and if we go ahead and click on that and check that out, we've now got a really awesome carousel effect. We have the correct name for each of the products being displayed, and we have the correct description changing over on the right as well. So that was definitely a little bit of work to get set up, but that really came together nicely. And now we have a really awesome effect here. Now, one thing, it does look like the hat image has an extra background that I haven't cleaned up yet, or I guess I forgot to. So by the time you see this, it should be taken care of. I'll go ahead and after I'm done recording, I'll clean up those hat images so that it shouldn't have that extra background, and it should all just look really nice and clean like that. So we'll go ahead and actually set up the navigation to the page of the slide that we have selected once we actually figure out how to build out all the different pages for our products. So for now, I think we can call this good.